You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and today is 2/25/21. Well, you're probably wondering, I know that I'm wondering, what is the world going to look like once COVID is over? And yes, COVID is coming to an end much more rapidly than many of you might even be aware. According to recent models, and we know how accurate they are, well, there's two models I've looked at. One is by the CDC, and they see no end in sight. Well, actually, three models. There's a model from some scientists out in California who say probably around the end of April, mid to end of April. And then there's others, even among the orthodoxy, who are saying it's going to happen in June. Point is that it's 2 to 4 months away, and you need to start thinking about it. I'd like to get your opinion. What do you think the world after COVID is going to look like? We're talking economically, societally, the family, education. All of these things have been greatly impacted by the pandemic, and we can take issue with whether the responses have been appropriate or not. Doesn't matter because they've occurred. The damage is done. The change is done. Now we've got to come to terms with it, and you've got to understand how your life is going to be different once this thing is over, and it's going to be over, of course. Even if it remains, even if it lingers, the actual heavy-duty, real impact of it, it's already done. And why not find somebody who actually thinks about these things? This person, Rebecca Costa, you are a futurist, a sociologist. You've had many top name clients, Apple, Oracle, GE, 3M, just to name a few. And we are thrilled to have you on the show, Rebecca. So life after COVID, I think that is what everybody's thinking about, but you probably haven't actually clarified your thoughts on it. But of course, you, Rebecca, have. So what does life after COVID look like?
Well, I always worry when someone calls me a futurist because then they want stock tips. Yeah. You know, what should I buy? Or there's another camp that think I talk to dead people and read tarot cards. I'm actually an expert at predictive analytics, but you know, if you ever want anyone to move away from you at a cocktail party, you just throw that out.
Yeah, well, we didn't say psychic, but
yeah,
you know,
thank you.
You know, like really, we could, you know, Yogi Berra once said, one of my favorite philosophers, that prediction is very difficult, especially about the future, right?
Yeah, that's correct. However, we have tools that Yogi Berra didn't have, and as you know, as we amass more data than any other time in human history, our predictions are becoming more and more accurate. That's the benefit of having so much data and having artificial intelligence and accurate models. Just as an example, we launched the GOES weather satellites just a little over a year ago. And the wonderful thing about that was it was giving us 3 times the data, but 3 times to 5 times the weather data actually translates into thousands of times greater accuracy in predicting the weather. So much so that just a year and a half later, I can pick up my phone and it says rain in 3 minutes. I mean, just imagine that. I mean, 10 years ago, if I would have told you that you're going to be carrying around this little device that would tell you that it was going to rain in the next 3 minutes. And of course, you know, being a scientist, I clocked it and it was pretty accurate. It did start drizzling. And I mean, it wasn't real rain. It was a little more of a drizzle, but you know, we're getting to that point where we can really look toward the future and predict with a great deal of accuracy what is likely to be the outcome. And when it comes to human behavior, it's not that difficult to look at our long history as troop-dwelling organisms and predict how we will behave following a crisis. What we will see is less change in regular everyday human behavior, and we will see quite a bit of change in our institutions. So it's important to sort of separate those. As a human being, you have a lot of genetically driven behaviors. You want to socialize. You want to be with people. You want to express yourself, creatively and through communication vehicles. You want to work. You are a beast of burden, and so when you work and when you exercise and you're mobile, you're healthier. You're happier. These are all things that are genetically driven after millions of years of evolution. And so we can expect normal everyday behavior of human beings not to change all that much. People will return to gymnasiums. They'll return to meaningful work. Husbands and wives will start arguing again because they're not quarantined and can't get not in a situation where they can't get away from each other. Now they can. We'll just see a lot of that behavior start to continue, but we will see a change in our institutions.
Right, and that's kind of a given. We've already seen the change. I think if you want to see what life is going to be like individually, come down to Florida, since the lockdowns and all the restrictions have probably been the least intrusive here. And you can get an idea of where we're headed. But institutionally, well, it's changing across the board. Just the idea of not going to an office to perform your work duties, but being able to do them at home, and then the impact on real estate, on banking, on debt, all these things. And speaking of debt, we've seen debt explode during this time. And what are your thoughts? Is debt going to continue to increase geometrically, or are we going to have this day of reckoning due to post-COVID?
Well, particularly for the people that follow your program and are pretty financially savvy, that there is a surefire way to deal with exponentiating debt, and that's hyperinflation, right? So the minute you devalue something, the debt begins to look rather small. And so the remedy to any kind of, trillions of dollars of debt is really to allow the economy to go into hyperinflation so that the trillions don't seem like it's such a big deal anymore. This is a growing concern of mine. I believe that the government may allow, and I do say allow, the country to go into an inflationary mode to deal with the mounting debt, which really when you really think about it, there's really no other way to deal with that kind of massive debt in such a short amount of time. But I'm not an economist, but I can say that there's certainly a long tail economic impact. And generally, as a futurist, I'm a technology and science futurist. I'm not an economist, but generally I tend to look out 5, 10, 50 years out, sometimes 1,000 or 1,000,000 years out. And when I'm consulting with the world's largest governments and corporations, that's what we have our eyes on, is looking at models of what that would look like. However, recently, I wrote an article that got a lot of attention, which was, let's just bring that in a little bit and look at 3 to 6 months out. What are some things that the government could really be on top of? As an example, people whose credit ratings have been absolutely decimated, right? They've fallen behind on mortgages, rents, so on and so forth. And it takes you years to dig out of that hole. So even if you economically found a way to survive this, your credit rating likely took a hit, and now it's going to take years and years to get out of that because the government has not been talking to the credit rating companies and saying we need to rein you in, and we don't want you to be punishing people who were through no fault of their own, affected by this global pandemic, and now are going to be affected for years to come in terms of whether they can buy a home or get a loan. Many things. In fact, there are some employers that check your credit rating before they'll give you a job as a sign of responsibility. So the unemployed then get, there's a piling on that happens. And that piling on is very, very worrisome. And speaking of piling on, in everyone's credit card contract, small type, it says that if your credit rating changes, the credit card companies are allowed to raise your rates, right? And I think there's one credit card company in either North or South Dakota that's charging like 87% now if your credit goes bad. So when I talk about this piling on, there's a very, very long tail that people through no fault of their own are going to experience. And in some cases, those holes you just can't dig out of. So what I'm worried about is that the government is not getting out ahead of and starting to put some guardrails around credit card companies that will act punitively in the name of profit, that will get their arms around the credit bureaus, get their arms around the what's going to happen when you begin to lift the eviction and foreclosure moratoriums. You can't really expect people to make up 10 months worth of rent, right? So these are the long tail consequences I think are really disconcerting for the person on the street.
Oh, for sure. But is artificially inflating or adjusting credit ratings really the solution here? It's kind of like, hey, we're drowning. Rather than send you a life preserver, we'll try to lower the water in the pool and see if that will help you. But you're already up to your neck and starting to have trouble breathing. And maybe government isn't the solution to this.
Well, I think putting guardrails in for from the period of time when the pandemic was first officially here and starting to affect individuals on Main Street and businesses. So we might go back to February or March of last year, and we might look at the credit change between March and 2020 and, when we pull out of the pandemic. Let's say it's June or let's say it's December. And you might discount, you might provide a discount in terms of how much a credit rating is allowed to drop during that period of time. Put a maximum on it and say, look, if you lost your job and you had no money and you weren't able to pay your utility bills and your rent and so on and so forth, the credit companies are only allowed to, lower your credit rating by this amount as a maximum. I'm just saying, put guardrails.
Right. I see what you're saying. And
otherwise, people can't ever. How are they going to dig out? I mean, there's a piling on effect that's going to happen.
I totally agree with you here. And when you say it through no fault of your own, you wound up in this mess. I mean, the government has basically mandated this through lockdowns, through restrictions, all of these things, through improper management of the pandemic by creating excessive fear, all of these things. So certainly things like PPP, which in my opinion was well-intentioned, but probably didn't go far enough. And then he opens it up to fraud and all these other things. So certainly this is a problem of the government's making, directly and indirectly, and they need to be part of the solution. But we have this detachment of our ruling class from the people they rule over. And they weren't supposed to be rulers. They were supposed to be leaders, but that's all changed. And really, most of the people in Congress and in government, hey, they all got their paychecks. Their benefits have gone up, their salaries have gone up, and they don't really know or care about what's happening on Main Street.
Don't just survive, thrive. The Financial Survival Network.
Goldterra Resource Corp is a gold exploration company that has assembled a highly prospective district-scale land position on the doorstep of the city of Yellowknife in Canada's Northwest Territories. Goldterra is currently focused on expanding and delineating gold resources at the company's Yellowknife City Gold Project, with a goal of discovering over 5 million ounces. With ready access to infrastructure and multiple high-grade gold discoveries, Goldterra is on track to re-establishing Yellowknife as one of the premier gold mining districts in Canada. Goldterra trades as YGT in Toronto and YGTFF on the OTC. For more information, go to goldterracorp.com. That's goldterracorp.com.
This is the Financial Survival Network, the information you need to thrive now more than ever.
Well, this is the problem. You know, you talk about leaders. I'm interested in pragmatic, problem solvers, right? I mean, don't wait until a problem is upon us. We know what the issues are, and we know which problems are exponentiating. You brought up debt. We understand the process of exponentiation, and we can look at models and see how bad it's going to be. You've got to catch these things when the snowball is the size of your hand, not when it's rolled downhill and is now the size of a large building. You know, it comes a point in which these problems, they begin to exponentiate and they cannot be stopped or easily unraveled. And if I have a criticism of leadership right now, it is that these things are known. No one's going to argue with me whether there's a long tail credit, a punitive credit score problem that's going to occur because people were forced not to go to work, forced to stay home, not earn a living, right? And forced to try to exist on a government dole out. You brought up the PPP program. I understand the intention was good, but it was structured completely wrong. Businesses don't need to be standing around going, I wonder if I'm going to get money. I wonder if Congress is going to pass another round. I wonder if I'm qualified. I wonder how much I'll get, including the stimulus program. People are sitting around going, am I getting $1,400? Am I getting $1,000? Am I getting $200? Am I qualified? Will they pass it? When will they pass it? You know, it's fine that the government has its own clock, but remember, my utility bills come once a month, right? And so there's sort of this disconnect of not understanding what the person on Main Street is going through and then designing the programs by reverse engineering what the need is. These PPP programs should have been lines of credit. They should have been government-insured lines of credit, which put the control back into the hands of small business so that they could borrow what they needed and not borrow, but they knew the line was there. And that would allow them to plan on how they were going to get out of the business, plan their investments, plan which staff they could keep on board. Instead of this herky-jerky, we might get a lump sum, it might be this amount, we might not get it, Congress might not approve it. That is not the way businesses run. Certainly small businesses cannot run that way. I'm getting these lump sum payments and not knowing. I mean, all Congress did was add to uncertainty in business by structuring it this way. It should have been government-insured lines of credit for as long as the crisis is going on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And if you look at New York City, collectively, tenants in New York are over $1 billion in arrears on their rent, on their rent payments. And if you look at restaurants, 92% of them are behind on their rent. And commercial real estate, all these things, obviously it's going to have an impact. And yet, like you said, they haven't dealt with it, or certainly not dealt with it effectively.
Well, here again, there is a very simple, elegant solution. I advocated for this during the subprime mortgage fiasco because we're on the cusp of having subprime mortgage collapse number 2, right? where all of a sudden a bunch of properties, once the moratorium is lifted, a bunch of properties go into foreclosure. The banks take back the assets, cut them down, right, in 50% value, flood the market, and create their own disaster. This is exactly what happened. The financial institutions created their own problem by foreclosing aggressively and then devaluing their own asset sheets. And we're looking at potentially that happening again. Now, if it happens again and these institutions go down that road, I say just let them fail, because it means they didn't learn anything round one. And the taxpayer paid a big price for that. And, and that can't happen again. So I have a very simple solution. And I had a simple solution during the subprime mortgage. Allow people to rewrite their loans for a longer period of time. Very simple. Very simple. If you've got a 30-year loan, we're going to make it a 35-year loan, and you're going to make up those payments on the back end. We're not going to come to you and say, make up, 10 months of mortgage payments. If you do that, landlords have the opportunity to go to tenants and say, we reset. I don't owe my lender, and you don't owe me. I'll get that rent on the back end. When I was a girl growing up in Japan, and this is very common in Asia, by the way, my grandmother had a 99-year mortgage in downtown Tokyo. There is nothing sacred about a 30-year mortgage. That's just something we made up, right? But you can have a 35-year mortgage. You can have a 50-year mortgage. The idea that living in a house should occupy a third to 50% of your income is rather crazy to begin with. That is just too much of your income going toward having housing. But if you could just elongate these mortgages to be 99 years, imagine. And not only was it 99 years, the wonderful thing about it was assumable, so that asset, that house, could stay in our family, right? Someone would move into it, a younger grandchild would move into it, and the loan would continue for 99 years. So, there's nothing sacred about a 30-year mortgage, and there needs to be some legislation that permits, because it's not allowed now. You can't rewrite the contracts. But here again, we need guardrails, because the minute you say you can rewrite the loans, the banks are going to look at it as a profit opportunity and assess closing fees and kinds of fees to rewrite your loan. And it isn't going to help you. You're going to owe more money at the end of rewriting that loan. So again, the government could put guardrails in and say, it has to be a rewrite at no increased fees or costs.
Agreed, for sure. And perhaps the idea of letting the bankruptcy court judge rewrite a mortgage, which they're not allowed to do now because they can't impair the security for the debt. Probably not a bad idea. What about student loans? The idea of just saying, pay back the principal, forget about the interest. Is that viable?
That's viable, or write the loan for a longer period of time. There's so many solutions, very elegant, very simple solutions. They're not complicated. They don't cost the government money, and they empower people. You're giving people tools that allow them to dig out and take control of their lives. And that's what people need right now. They need to have a sense of, there are all these options that allow me to take control of my life.
Agreed. So look for the simple solutions. They work, and really start thinking about this long term, because we've been putting Band-Aids on effectively, and the Band-Aids aren't very effective. And they're causing a lot of grief out there and a lot of pain and uncertainty, and that's bad for the economy. And effectively, I'd say 25% of the population is kind of being disenfranchised from the American dream.
There's also this, there have been several reports and studies done on human happiness and its relationship with trust, right? And there is a direct correlation between the people that you trust in your family, in your community, right? And your happiness. But interestingly enough, that those societies where people trust their government, those individuals in that society always rank their happiness much higher than places where there might be corruption, authoritarian governments, places where the citizens fundamentally don't trust their government. The government must protect the citizens, but in this particular case, not only protect them from the virus, but protect them from unfair financial consequences, which have a longer tail. And I don't see us getting on top of this. Let me give you an example of how the programs we currently have breed and feed government mistrust. In April, which is just around the corner, there's a lot of people that are going to be shocked that unemployment benefits are taxable.
Right. Yeah.
Your stimulus check that you got, taxable. So in a way, the government says, we're going to help you out. We're going to give you this unemployment, right? Which is barely enough to exist on. I don't even know how people that are just on unemployment are making it, but it's barely, at a poverty level. We're going to give you unemployment. We're going to give you stimulus checks. But by the way, we're going to take some of that back. We're going to have the appearance of being quite generous and caring. And by the way, let us kick you when you're down, because in April, you're going to owe a tax bill. And by the way, if you cannot pay that tax bill, which of course, if you're on unemployment and depending on occasional stimulus lump sums, the likelihood that you cannot pay your taxes is very, very high. If you can't, that opens the door for the IRS to lien your home, garnish your wages at work, right? It opens the door to a lot of horrible consequences. Never mind, we talked about your credit rating. Now you've got an IRS lien against you. That shows up when employers look to see your background. All of these things start to pile on each other. I hope that people are getting a full picture of what the economic consequences are for the person on Main Street and how important it is to get on top of these things and say, how easy would it be to just vote and say, hey, last year and this year, unemployment benefit stimulus checks are not taxable.
Yeah.
So easy to do.
Yeah, and it makes total sense. That's the government. They give with one hand and they take away with the other.
But it's kind of a shyster type of operation, and it doesn't build trust. If you give something to me to help me out because I'm down and out, and then you come back and take some of it back, or else I'm going to march in the IRS and lien everything you have and what you make in the future. This is not the environment that people are going to be able to feel good about as they come out of COVID. You can't, this is an unprecedented disaster. It's a global disaster. We've never faced anything like it. But the real crime is not to look ahead. We can't do anything about last year. We can't do anything about last month, but we can do something about April.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I couldn't agree with you more. And something needs to be done. And otherwise, we're going to have an outright economic collapse. And nobody wants that for sure. In any event, people want to find out more about you, Rebecca. Read your work, get your books, your articles. Where should they go?
They should just go to my website, which is RebeccaCosta.com. That's RebeccaCosta.com.
All right. And you'll see a link to it in the show notes to this interview on Financial Survival Network. Send us your thoughts about Rebecca's ideas. We'd love to hear what you think. KL@KerryLutz.com. If you have any questions for her, let us know. I will forward the emails off to her and get you an answer. And make sure you sign up for our free newsletter on FinancialSurvivalNetwork.com. Very apropos topic, Rebecca, especially in light of our name, Financial Survival, because that's what this is all about. And the government's not doing enough to help any of you to survive out there. So we got to take it into our own hands, pressure these people, and get them to do the right thing if it's at all possible. Hey, appreciate you coming on. And like I said, any questions, email is kl@kerrylutz.com. Rebecca, good luck, and please get the message out.
Thank you, Kerry.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.